I remember going into people's homes for fundraising meetings, absolutely scared to death. I would be shaking and sweating and totally in my head, right? I was so worried about what they were going to think of me, how I was going to make them feel, and this whole social relational dynamic of fundraising. Which brings me to my point, right? Fundraising strategy is rarely the reason a person is unsuccessful in the fundraising journey. Success almost always boils down to the emotional and mental roadblocks that pop up along the way on the fundraising journey. And so I'm going to talk about three things here that I think are really important to grasp for the fundraiser because it helps them streamline their efforts and become more effective at fundraising faster, right? So the first thing that we do oftentimes as fundraisers is we hyper focus on strategy, right? We say, I'm not raising funds well, it must be my strategy. I'm here to tell you that is rarely the case, right? Fundraising strategy is not rocket science. If you connect well enough with people, if you share well enough with people, and if you ask them consistently over an extended period of time, you're going to raise a significant amount of funds for your organization. But here's the reason why we hyper focus on strategy. It's because we're so afraid to dive into the deeper truths that would require deeper, more challenging, more difficult work, right, to overcome. Fundraising strategy is easy to focus on. I can tinker with this. I can try this next gimmick. I can do this other thing, right? It's easy for us to go there. It's more challenging for us to dive into ourselves and untie the knots within that are keeping us from successful fundraising, right? So instead of taking the truth head on and solving the problem at the root, we decide to kind of believe in this half truth that strategy is our problem, and we just kind of go at the thing with the least resistant path mentality, right? Like, I'm just going to do the least I can possibly do to try and solve this problem and see if it solves it, rather than diving into the tough stuff, right? And so here's two emotional roadblocks, the two greatest ones that I see that are derailing fundraisers. And number one is just fear of what people will think of them, right? I'm afraid they're going to think I'm a beggar. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm lazy. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm only worried about the money. I'm afraid I'm going to make them feel uncomfortable. I'm afraid they're going to treat me poorly, right? It's this whole social relational dynamic that scares us. There's this discomfort in being this direct with people regarding money, right? Which is an intoxicant in our world, right? A lot of people are addicted to it and they want it and they're grasping for it and they're trying to get it. And we know that, right? And so for us to come in and say, hey, let me have it is like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, right? And while all of this might be true, right? They might think those things of you. You might make them uncomfortable and so on and so forth, right? Here's the deal. You can only control yourself. You cannot worry about what they're going to think of you because all sorts of different people are going to think all sorts of different things about you. And if you want to truly be highly successful at this thing, you're going to have to, some people are not going to understand what you do. They're going to actually disagree with what you do and how you do it, right? There are going to be people who stand in opposition to you, if not directly, then at least in a indirect way, right? That is just going to happen, right? You cannot avoid that social and relational discomfort, right? We can't wiggle back to strategy and think that'll solve the problem. We've got to dive into that thing and say, okay, I've got to get to the point to where I don't care what people think, right? I've got to understand that, hey, this is my call. This is what I'm passionate about. I've got to be all about it and let go of what people think, because that is what is keeping you from jumping into those situations as often as you should, as transparently as you should, as assertively as you should, right? And again, I'm not trying to tell you to be a jerk or anything like that, right? You don't have to come in guns a-blazing like, hey, give me money, right? That's not the case. But you've got to go in there with confidence and assertiveness. And if that person doesn't get it or doesn't see it or doesn't, appreciate how you're doing it, that's totally okay. You weren't rude by asking them for money. What happened on the other end was that they felt uncomfortable, right? They're holding so tightly to their money that they felt uncomfortable, and that made them angry, or that made them so on and so forth. You can't control that, right? That is on them. And of course, you know, you don't want them to live in that misery any more than anybody else does. But if you're going to be successful in this space, you've got to become comfortable with that discomfort socially and relationally, right? You have two choices essentially. You can hang out in the middle ground of mediocrity, right? Where you try to please all people except yourself, right? Because you'll make yourself miserable trying to please all people and trying to make sure that you don't hurt anyone's feelings and so on and so forth. Or you can run full speed ahead at your call, right? Regardless of what people think, and make significant gains professionally and personally. This is the number one reason I'm telling you that fundraisers are not successful. Number two is that they're worried about the money, right? They're so worried about the money. If I don't get this money, it's all going to fall apart. And this worry produces an energy within them. It's this sort of grasping and fighting and clawing and controlling and trying to beat down closed doors. And it produces a subtle manipulation and subtle departures from the truth, right? It's this energy that keeps them from deeply connecting with people and becoming a successful fundraiser, right? It makes them more uptight. They can't release their full personality into interactions, with other people. This worry, right? This concern does a few things, right? Number one, it pushes people away. When I'm interacting with other people with that energy going on within me, they can feel it and it pushes them away. Even if they're not conscious of it, right? Something about it just feels to them, right? And they sort of stiff arm. They create distance, and understandably so, because you would do the same thing if that energy was approaching you as well. Number two, it keeps us from being in the moment, right? So when I'm sitting across from someone, I'm not here right now. I'm not locked in on what they're saying. I'm up here so worried about what's going on. I've got to have this money. I've got to make sure that this goes well. I've got to make sure that that goes well. I've got to make sure that I'm flattering them. I've got to make sure that so on and so forth, right? It makes us depart from simply just being present in the moment and caring for the person across from us, which again keeps us from raising a significant amount of money. And then lastly, what it does is it eats away at us from the inside out, right? This worry and concern is no good for a human being. Keeps us up at night. It keeps us worried throughout all of our day, right? And eventually we just can't take the pressure of this anymore and we quit, right? We say, I can't do that anymore, or I've got to stop doing this for a while, or so on and so forth, right? And so it's the pressure of these things that keeps fundraisers from being successful. It's these internal roadblocks, I'm telling you, far more often than strategy, that keep fundraisers from raising a significant amount of money, right? They have to get to the point to where the money is an offshoot of loving people well. It's secondary to the greater mission. And when they get to this point, right, when a fundraiser gets to the point to where they're like, you know what, I can only do so much about what people think of me, right? I can only just operate in integrity within my own heart. And I can't worry about this money anymore, right? I've just got to execute the mission and trust that it'll show up. When the fundraiser gets to that point, they operate at such a level of freedom, right? They become way more effective in their fundraising, and this allows the money to flow, right? It's as if they're like sort of gripping everything so tightly through these two fears and mentalities. And when they let it go, sort of releases everything to flow more freely, right? So the idea being that the fundraiser has to recognize, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing in this life. I've got to run at that thing full speed. I got two choices, right? I can either not run it at full speed, not be successful, and make myself miserable, or I can run it at full speed, be successful, and find this deeper level fulfillment within myself and not worry about what other people have to say, right? So I'm telling you again, I could say this till I'm blue in the face. I will say that I say this to people all the time, and the percentage of people that truly grasp and understand this is incredibly small. It is not strategy. It is not strategy. It is not strategy. It is the mental and emotional roadblocks that pop up on the fundraiser's journey.